You have felt it, haven't you? That quiet conversation that unfolds when no one else is listening. The world calls it strange, this habit of speaking into the silence of your own company. They watch you move your lips in the garden of your solitude, and they wonder if you have forgotten how to be among people. They see you pause in the middle of a task, whispering something to yourself, and they assume you are losing touch with reality. But let me tell you something your spirit already knows, something that has been living in your bones long before anyone ever told you it was strange. What they call peculiar is actually the mark of a soul that has learned to befriend the deepest parts of itself. Those who speak to themselves when alone are not lost in madness. They are found in a kind of wisdom that the hurried world has long forgotten. Walk with me now through these moments of understanding, and you will see that your quiet dialogues are not a sign of loneliness, but the language of a soul that refuses to abandon itself. You will see that every word you speak into the emptiness is a seed planted in the soil of your becoming. There is a garden within you that needs tending. The world outside demands your attention with its noise and its urgency, pulling you toward 1,000 obligations that scatter your spirit like seeds in the wind. It wants you busy, distracted, always moving toward the next thing without pausing to ask if the movement itself has meaning. But when you close the door and step into your own presence, something shifts. The air becomes still. The light softens, and in that sacred pause you begin to speak, not to impress or explain or defend yourself, but simply to untangle the threads of your own becoming. You are not talking to the walls. You are talking to the part of yourself that listens when everyone else has turned away. You are talking to the witness within, the one who has been with you through every moment of your life, the one who knows your true name. This is not weakness. This is the first trait of your unique nature. You possess the rare capacity to be your own companion, to walk beside yourself through the valleys of confusion and the mountaintops of clarity without needing the world to validate your journey. While others flee from silence, fearing what they might discover in its depths, you have learned to sit with yourself as one sits with an old friend. You speak because you trust that you are worth listening to. You speak because somewhere along the way you understood that the relationship you have with yourself is the foundation upon which all other connections are built. And this is not something taught in schools or celebrated in the public square. This is wisdom that comes from walking through your own darkness and deciding not to run. It comes from the moments when you felt completely alone, and instead of collapsing into that aloneness, you turned toward yourself and said, "I am here with you. I will not leave." The people who dismiss your self-talk do not understand that it is a practice of presence, a way of staying connected to your own truth in a world that is constantly trying to pull you away from it. They do not see that when you speak to yourself, you are performing an act of radical self-loyalty, choosing to remain in dialogue with your soul, even when it would be easier to numb yourself with endless distractions. The second trait lives in the way your mind moves through the world. You are not content with the surface of things. When you speak to yourself, you are not rehearsing small talk or planning tomorrow's errands, though these things may pass through your awareness. No, what you are doing is far more sacred. You are taking the raw material of your days and turning it over in your hands like a stone pulled from a river, examining its weight, its texture, its hidden colors. This is the work of deep contemplation, and it cannot be done in the marketplace of external voices. It requires the sanctuary of your own consciousness. You think in layers. You see connections that others miss because they are moving too quickly to notice. When something troubles you, you do not simply push it away. You bring it into the light of your inner dialogue and you ask it questions. What are you teaching me? Where did you come from? What do you need from me? This is the language of a reflective soul, one that understands that life is not meant to be consumed but digested, not skimmed but savored. While the world rushes past, you pause, you turn inward. You speak to yourself because you know that wisdom does not arrive in the noise of the crowd. It arrives in the quiet conversation between who you are and who you are becoming. You are someone who needs to process
to understand, to make meaning from the chaos. And this is not a flaw, this is a sign that you are awake, that you have not traded your depth for the comfort of shallow certainty. The world wants simple answers, quick fixes, easy explanations. But you know that truth is rarely simple. It unfolds slowly, revealing itself in layers, and it requires patience and presence to receive it. So you talk to yourself. You walk yourself through the complexity. You honor the fact that your mind is not a machine designed to produce instant clarity, but a living, breathing organism that needs time and space to integrate what it experiences. And in that space, in those moments of self-directed conversation, you are doing something profoundly important. You are teaching yourself how to think, how to discern, how to separate what is true from what is merely loud. And here is where the third trait reveals itself, like a flower opening in the darkness. You are deeply self-aware, but not in the way the world defines it. This is not the self-awareness of the mirror, obsessed with appearance and impression. This is the self-awareness of the soul, attuned to its own rhythms, its own needs, its own truth. When you
speak to yourself, you are mapping the landscape of your inner world. You notice when your energy shifts. You feel when something is out of alignment. You recognize the difference between the voice of your fear and the voice of your intuition. And you have learned to question which one is speaking before you follow its direction. This kind of awareness is not given freely by the world. It must be cultivated in solitude. It grows in the soil of self-reflection, watered by honest dialogue with the parts of yourself that you might prefer to ignore. But you do not ignore them. You invite them to speak. You listen to your doubts, your dreams, your contradictions, and you do not judge them harshly. Instead, you hold them with the tenderness of one who understands that every part of you is trying in its own way to help you survive, to grow, to become whole. This is the gift of your inner dialogue. It keeps you honest. It keeps you connected to the truth of your own experience in a world that constantly asks you to perform a version of yourself that fits more comfortably into its expectations. You are not interested in performing. You are interested in being real. And being real requires that you check in with yourself regularly, that you ask how you are truly feeling beneath the mask you wear for the world, that you give voice to the things that would otherwise remain unspoken and therefore unknown. There are people who walk through life never really knowing themselves because they never pause long enough to ask the questions. They accept the stories they were told about who they are, and they live inside those stories without ever wondering if they are true. But you are different. You are someone who questions. You are someone who checks your own premises, who examines your own motivations, who is willing to admit when you do not have all the answers. And this willingness to sit in uncertainty, to stay curious about yourself even when it is uncomfortable, this is what makes you self-aware in the deepest sense. You are not afraid to look at yourself honestly. You are not afraid to speak to the parts of you that are still growing, still learning, still trying to figure out how to be in this world without losing yourself in the process. But there is a fourth trait, and it is perhaps the most profound. Those who speak to themselves are often the most creative souls. Not creative in the narrow sense of making art, though many of you do. Creative in the deeper sense of being able to imagine possibilities that do not yet exist, to solve problems in ways that others have not considered, to see the world not only as it is, but as it could be. When you talk to yourself, you are engaging in a kind of mental rehearsal, a laboratory of thought where ideas can be tested and refined before they meet the judgment of the external world. You play with language, with concepts, with scenarios. You ask yourself, what if and why not? And how might this work? This internal dialogue is the birthplace of innovation, the sacred space where the new emerges from the old. It is no accident that so many great thinkers, artists, and visionaries have been known to speak to themselves. They understood that creation begins in conversation, and the first conversation is always with oneself. You are not simply repeating what you have been told. You are synthesizing, reimagining, building something that belongs uniquely to you. This is why your inner voice is so important. It is not an echo. It is an original song, one that only you can sing. Every time you speak to yourself, you are engaging your imagination. You are stepping outside the constraints of what is and entering the realm of what might be. You are exploring different versions of reality, different responses to the same situation, different ways of understanding the same problem. And this kind of mental flexibility, this ability to hold multiple perspectives at once, this is the foundation of all creative thinking. The people who never talk to themselves often think in rigid patterns. They accept the first answer that comes, the most obvious solution, the path that everyone else is taking, but you are not like that. You question, you wonder, you explore, you turn things around in your mind and look at them from different angles. And sometimes in the middle of that exploration, you stumble upon something unexpected, an insight, a connection, a solution that no one else has seen, because no one else has taken the time to sit with the problem in the way that you have. This is the gift of your inner dialogue. It creates space for discovery. It allows your mind to wander and play and experiment without the pressure of external judgment. And in that freedom, in that playful exploration, you become capable of things that others might call genius, but which you know are simply the result of staying in conversation with yourself long enough to let the truth reveal itself. And then you understand that what the world sees as oddness is actually a form of intimacy. To speak to yourself is to refuse to be a stranger to your own soul. It is to reject the notion that you must always be performing for an audience, that your thoughts are only valid when they are witnessed by others. In a culture that worships constant connection and fears the quiet, your ability to be alone with yourself without discomfort is a quiet rebellion. It says that you do not need the noise to feel real. You do not need the validation to know that you exist. You are enough company for yourself. And that is a kind of freedom that many people never experience. They live their entire lives afraid of their own presence, filling every moment with distractions because the silence feels too heavy, too exposing. But you have walked into that silence and you have found it welcoming. You have discovered that solitude is not the same as loneliness, and that the voice within you is not something to fear, but something to treasure. You have learned that the most honest conversations you will ever have are the ones you have with yourself, because there is no reason to pretend, no need to edit or soften or explain. You can say the things that you would never say to another person. You can admit the fears that you keep hidden. You can express the hopes that feel too fragile to share. And in that raw honesty and that willingness to be completely yourself, even when no one is watching, you find a kind of peace that the world cannot give and cannot take away. You find the truth of who you are beneath all the roles you play, beneath all the expectations you carry, beneath all the stories you have been told about what your life should look like. Now, let me speak to the shadow that sometimes accompanies this gift. There are moments when you wonder if you speak to yourself too much, if this habit separates you from the world of other people. You notice how easily you slip into your inner dialogue, how sometimes it feels easier to process your thoughts alone than to share them with someone who might not understand. And there is a loneliness in that, is there not? A sense that you carry worlds inside you that remain invisible to those around you. This is the double edge of self-reliance. It gives you strength, but it can also build walls. So let me offer you this. Your ability to be your own companion is a treasure, but it is not meant to replace all other companionship. It is meant to prepare you for deeper connections, to teach you how to listen, how to hold space, how to be present. The same skills you use when you speak to yourself, the patience, the curiosity, the compassion, these are the skills that can transform your relationships with others. You do not have to choose between your inner world and the outer one. You can move between them like the tide, knowing when to withdraw into the sanctuary of your own thoughts and when to offer the gift of your presence to another soul who might be searching for exactly the kind of understanding you have cultivated within yourself. The key is balance. The key is knowing that your self-talk is a practice that enriches you, not one that isolates you. It teaches you how to be comfortable with silence, how to sit with difficult emotions without running, how to ask good questions and wait patiently for answers. And these are precisely the skills that make you a good friend, a good partner, a good listener. When you meet someone who is struggling, you do not rush to fill the silence with empty reassurances. You know how to be present with discomfort because you have practiced being present with your own. When someone shares something vulnerable with you, you do not immediately try to fix it or minimize it or turn the conversation back to yourself. You know how to hold space because you have learned to hold space for yourself. This is the paradox. The more comfortable you become with your own company, the more you have
to offer others. Not because you need them less, but because you approach them from a place of wholeness rather than desperation. You are not looking for someone to complete you or save you or distract you from yourself. You are looking for genuine connection, for someone who can meet you in the depth that you have learned to inhabit alone. There's also this truth. Many people who speak to themselves are healers in disguise, not in the formal sense of the word, though some of you may walk that path, but healers in the sense that you have done the work of sitting with your own pain, your own confusion, your own darkness, and you have emerged with a kind of gentle wisdom that the world desperately needs. When you speak to yourself, you are practicing the art of self-compassion. You are learning how to hold yourself without judgment, how to ask the right questions, how to soothe the parts of you that are afraid. And this practice changes you. It softens you in the places where the world has tried to harden you. It teaches you that transformation does not require an audience or applause. It happens in the quiet, unseen moments when you choose to stay with yourself even when it would be easier to look away. And when you meet someone else who is struggling, who is lost, who feels like they cannot make sense of their own story, you bring that same quality of presence to them. You know how to listen without fixing. You know how to witness without judging. You know how to hold space for another person's unfolding because you have learned to hold space for your own. You understand that healing is not about having all the answers, but about being willing to sit in the questions together. You understand that sometimes the most healing thing you can offer another person is simply the assurance that they are not alone, that their pain is valid, that their struggle makes sense. And you can offer this because you have offered it to yourself again and again in the privacy of your own inner dialogue. So what do you do with this understanding? How do you live in a world that often misunderstands the value of your inner dialogue? First, you honor it. You do not apologize for needing time alone, for needing silence, for needing to process your thoughts in your own way. You protect this practice as you would protect anything sacred. You create space for it in your days, even when the world demands more from you than you feel you can give. You set boundaries. You say no to things that would drain you without filling you. You recognize that your need for solitude is not selfishness, but self-preservation. Not isolation, but integration. You give yourself permission to step away from the noise, to close the door, to speak to yourself without guilt or shame. Second, you use it wisely. Let your self-talk be a source of clarity, not confusion. Notice when your inner dialogue becomes critical or punishing, when it repeats old stories that no longer serve you. And gently, with the same compassion you would offer a dear friend, redirect it toward truth. Ask yourself better questions. Instead of, why am I like this? Ask, what is this trying to teach me? Instead of what is wrong with me, ask, what am I ready to release? Your inner voice is powerful. It shapes the way you see yourself in the world. Let it be a voice of encouragement, of curiosity, of love. Let it remind you of your strength, your resilience, your capacity to grow. Let it speak to you the way you would speak to someone you deeply care about, with kindness and patience and unwavering faith in their potential. Third, share your gifts. The insights you gain from your inner dialogue, the wisdom you distill from your solitude, these are not meant to stay hidden. Find ways to bring them into your relationships, your work, your creative expressions. You do not have to explain where they come from. You simply offer them, trusting that what is real will resonate. Maybe you write, maybe you speak, maybe you simply show up differently in the world. more grounded, more present, more yourself. Whatever form it takes, let the fruit of your inner work nourish others. Let them see what is possible when someone has the courage to know themselves deeply and live from that knowing. And here is what you must remember. You are not strange for talking to yourself. You are awake. You are engaged in the sacred work of knowing yourself. And that is one of the bravest things a soul can do in a world that prefers you distracted and disconnected. Your inner dialogue is a sign that you have not abandoned yourself, that you are still curious about your own depths, that you believe you are worth understanding, and you are. You are worth every conversation, every question, every moment of reflection. The world may not always recognize the value of what you are doing, but that does not make it less true. Keep speaking to yourself. Keep listening. Keep turning inward when you need to find your way back to what is real. You are building something that cannot be taken from you, a relationship with yourself that is honest, compassionate, and endlessly unfolding. And that, dear soul, is the foundation of a life lived with integrity and meaning. It is the foundation of a life where you are not constantly looking outside yourself for permission to be who you are, for validation that you are enough, for someone else to tell you what you already know in your bones. You become your own source, not in a way that cuts you off from others, but in a way that allows you to connect with them from a place of authenticity rather than need. You become someone who knows their own mind, who trusts their own instincts, who can navigate the world with a compass that points always toward truth. The sun does not apologize for rising alone each morning. The river does not seek permission to speak to the stones. And you do not need the world's approval to be in conversation with the truth of who you are. Your inner dialogue is not a flaw to be corrected. It is a gift to be cherished, a practice to be honored, a doorway to wisdom that opens only from the inside. So the next time you find yourself speaking into the quiet, know that you are not alone in this. You are part of an ancient lineage of souls who understood that the journey inward is the only journey that ever truly leads anywhere. And though the path may be solitary, it is never lonely when you walk it with yourself as both seeker and guide. Keep speaking. Keep listening. Keep becoming. The world needs the clarity that only your kind of soul can bring. The world needs people who know how to be still enough to hear their own truth and brave enough to live by it. And whether you speak your thoughts aloud or hold them in the silence of your heart, know that every word you offer yourself is a prayer, a promise that you will not forget who you are, even when the world tries to convince you otherwise. You are the keeper of your own flame, the guardian of your own becoming, the witness to your own unfolding. And in that role, in that sacred conversation with yourself, you are doing exactly what you were meant to do. You are remembering. You are awakening. You are coming home to the truth that has been waiting for you all along, that you were never alone because you have always had yourself, and that is enough. There is something else I want you to understand about this practice of speaking to yourself. It is not just about processing your thoughts or understanding your emotions, though it is certainly those things. It is also about maintaining your sovereignty in a world that is constantly trying to colonize your attention, your energy, your very sense of self. Every day you are bombarded with messages telling you who you should be, what you should want, how you should live. And most people absorb these messages without question, without resistance, without even noticing that they are being shaped by forces outside themselves. But when you speak to yourself, you are creating a countercurrent. You are establishing an internal authority that cannot be overridden by external noise. You are saying, I will decide what is true for me. I will decide what matters. I will decide who I am becoming. This is why your self-talk matters so much. It is not just a quirk or a habit, it is an act of self-determination. It is how you maintain your integrity in a world that would rather you be compliant, predictable, easy to understand, and easy to control. You are someone who refuses to hand over the keys to your own consciousness. You refuse to let others tell you what you are feeling, what you are experiencing, what you should do next. You check in with yourself, You ask yourself the hard questions. You listen for the answer that comes from within, not the answer that would make everyone else comfortable. And this stubborn insistence on knowing your own mind, this is what makes you dangerous to systems that rely on conformity. This is what makes you powerful. But power comes with responsibility. When you have cultivated this strong relationship with yourself, when you have learned to trust your own inner guidance, you must also be careful not to use it as an excuse to dismiss the perspectives of others. Self-awareness can sometimes tip into self-absorption if you are not careful. The goal is not to become so enamored with your own thoughts that you stop being curious about the thoughts of others. The goal is to be so grounded in yourself that you can genuinely listen to others without losing your center. You can hear their truth without abandoning your own. You can be influenced without being controlled. This is the balance that those who speak to themselves must learn to walk. The balance between inner certainty and outer openness, between knowing yourself and remaining teachable, between standing firm and staying flexible. And let me speak to one more thing, because I know there are some of you who have been told that talking to yourself is a sign of mental illness, that it is something to be concerned about, something to hide. Let me be clear. There is a difference between healthy self-talk and the kind of internal dialogue that signals distress. Healthy self-talk is calm, compassionate, reflective. It helps you process, understand, and grow. It gives you clarity and peace. Unhealthy self-talk is harsh, repetitive, intrusive. It traps you in cycles of rumination and self-criticism. It makes you feel worse, not better. If your inner dialogue is causing you pain, if it feels like you cannot turn it off, if it is filled with voices that attack or demean or frighten you, then yes, reach out for support. Talk to someone who can help you find peace within yourself. But if your self-talk is simply the way you think, the way you process, the way you make sense of your life, then do not let anyone shame you for it. Do not let anyone convince you that there is something wrong with you for being in conversation with yourself. You are not broken. You are not strange. You are simply awake in a way that many people are not, and that wakefulness requires a different kind of engagement with your own mind. Honor it, protect it, use it wisely, and know that in doing so, you are not just taking care of yourself. You are preserving a way of being in the world that is becoming increasingly rare and increasingly necessary. We need people who think for themselves. We need people who are not afraid to sit in silence and listen for truth. We need people who can hold complexity without collapsing into simplistic answers. We need people like you who speak to themselves not because they are alone, but because they understand that the most important conversation they will ever have is the one they have with their own soul. If this spoke to your spirit, write in the comments, "I am awakening now."